So, my name's Kevin. I'm a product manager at Tableau, and I am just as dedicated as you are. My wife, who actually also works at Tableau, who made it today, and we are expecting our first data baby.
Ooh.
Thank you, thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Jenna Gegg and I am the Cloud Economics Program Manager at Tableau. And I'm really, really passionate about all things cloud cost. And I know there aren't many of us, but we're hoping today there are a lot of us here in the room. Two? I think we've got a couple more than that.
Yeah.
It's perfect, my people.
I think this is your people, yeah, I'm on it. So this is gonna be a silly question, I feel like, with this group, but do you all know how much money you spend in the public cloud? Show of hands, show of hands. Do you all know what the number is? Yeah?
Got some no's,
Okay,
some yeses,
all right.
okay.
Do you guys know what your budget is in the cloud? Yeah? Budget? Okay, maybe not so much. Okay, all right. Cool. Well, assuming we're not full of IT professionals and application development teams here, we had the same problems at Tableau, and we're kind of going to walk you through that today. We were lacking visibility in the entire system. Going to show you, talk a little bit about our journey, some of the challenges we had, solutions that we built, and kind of talk to you about our results and what's next. And for those did anyone see my talk on Wednesday? All right, so this is going to be a little review. So back in 2015, oh yeah, I remember you. You were there for Wednesday. Back in 2015, our cloudy roads were made of gravel. We had one AWS account, and it was the first home to our Tableau Online site, US East 1. Is anyone working on a US East 1, Tableau Online? All right, we got one. We had a few other public applications there, Checkout, Web Store, and in 2016, we were having some early challenges with that one account. We had security wasn't always up to par. We had one team operating there, and then kind of other people just latched on. It was a development place. We needed, those teams were deleting other people's resources. We needed a place where we could build some governance. So in 2016, our team was formed, the cloud infrastructure team. And our charter was to give people self-service access to the environment and to support them and build guardrails where needed. So at this point, we picked up our shovels, we put in some asphalt, and put in a stop sign or two. And later in 2016, Adam joined our company, and he came with a rallying cry of putting all of Tableau's infrastructure into the public cloud. At which point, every development team at Tableau wanted access to AWS, which was great, except we had one account, and we knew that wasn't going to scale. So at this point, we worked with our partners at AWS, and we worked with them to deploy what's called the MultiAccount Model. Does anyone know what this model is, AWS MultiAccount Model? So the idea is that you have one service or application for one account per canonical environment. So that's kind of confusing. Let me give you an example. Say we have an analytics team, and they're deploying Tableau in the public cloud. We would give them 3 accounts for their dev, stage, and prod accounts. So we could break them out. This was very beneficial for teams. We could give them their own environment that wouldn't conflict with prod, and they could move their changes through the pipeline. This was the early days of the multi-account. AWS was just coming out with these frameworks and these white papers. And the automation, while it solved a lot of our problems, it wasn't very automated. So we had to do a lot of those things. So in 2017, our team worked on automating all the things. Automating access into the accounts, creating new accounts, networking topologies, security, governance, and guardrails. Again, the goal of this was to give people self-service actions to the cloud so they can build their products and teams, or build their products and applications. And it's starting to see in 2017 here, we're tripling the number of accounts we have and our consumption, which is what we're going to talk about right now. And our 1-lane road was turning into a 2-lane road, and we kind of put in a median in between. And in 2018, budgeting started asking all these questions. What are we putting up there? What are these things? What is our investment? So we started looking for a Jenna. We didn't have one. It was me, a couple of other members of the team. Finance was asking questions. So we started building, and I'm going to walk you through this, started building, again, working with our partners at AWS, the first version of our cost and usage report pipeline. Later in that year, 2018, Tableau Online at this point is fully deployed into AWS. Very excited about that. Every pod we build from here on out will be there as well. And later in that year, all the executables, the Tableau executables you all have on your laptop, the pipeline moved into AWS as well. And we're seeing this trend continue, as you see on our graph here. We make a full push into the public cloud. Teams are continuing to operate, continuing to build. But we're starting to see the next level of scaling issues. And again, we needed visibility into that spend.
All right, thanks, Kevin. I'm going to talk about some of our challenges. And there were a lot of challenges, but today we're just going to focus on those related to cost. So Kevin mentioned towards the end of 2016, Adam joined Tableau as the CEO with a rallying cry, all things move to the cloud. And that really brought a focus in innovation and improving agility. What we didn't look at is how our business processes needed to also change to support this move. So the first big challenge was accountability behind the costs that we were incurring. So if we think about before we moved to the cloud, if a team needed infrastructure, they would go to a centralized core infrastructure team, let them know about their needs for hardware. A purchase requisition would be created that then would go through approval of managers, up through leadership, finance. Everyone who needed to know about this purchase being made was involved in the process. When you move to the cloud, those things don't quite exist. And with the cloud infrastructure team so focused on enablement, we wanted to get people in the cloud and get them there fast and not be a roadblock. So people have the ability to spin up whatever resources when they need them, without the eyes that we had before. Which brings us to our next challenge. Cost visibility. People are incurring costs, but how are we enabling them to see those costs that are being incurred? As Kevin mentioned, we use the multi-account model, so we have over, I think you said 400 accounts.
400 accounts.
And with teams, one team may have 15, 20 accounts for their different services. It wasn't really scalable to be going into Cost Explorer for those 15 accounts and looking at your costs and adding them up. If you were a manager, if you're line level, if you're a developer, how do you really get access to what you need to dig in to be able to see if you had a code change, what was the cost impact of that change? Also getting a lot of questions from finance or even from tax. They're trying to work on their sales tax accrual. How do we get them the right information that they need? And then lastly, cost transparency. So how do we get everyone aware of the cost and make sure that they understand the cost? Cloud cost is not the easiest thing. I don't know if any of you ever get to sit down with folks and try to explain to them why they're incurring expenses for their stop EC2 instance with all the volumes attached to it that we still pay for. So it's very complex. We really needed to have all this information in one place that could be used by developers, managers, leadership, accounting, finance, whoever it may be. That's what we needed to have, but we didn't have it. So next, Kevin's going to talk a little bit about our solutions.
Thank you. So show of hands, for those of you who are operating in the cloud. Are you all using third-party tools? Cloud Health, Cloudability, Cloud Checker? Okay, cool. Any teams built their own solutions? Any of their own custom pipelines for ETL? Okay, cool. It's about what we expect. So at Tableau, okay, let's start off with why buy versus why we build. So out of the box, buying something is great, right? Gives you your needs quickly, fast, but in the way that they want it, right? The way that they have it set up. And there's a lot of other benefits they bring too, like RI purchases and recommendations. Why build something? really customized. And when we talk about the multi-account model and how many accounts that we have, Amazon isn't quite there yet with our multi-account model. So we had to build a lot of these things, a lot of the hooks that get all that data for us. So that's why we did both at Tableau. Specifically, and then we did it again. So we're on version 2 of both of these things. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our build stuff, because that's the interesting part of it. The reason why we build things, Tableau, of course, right? We can use our product. We can have calcs. We could build all the other customizations, other data sources. Third-party tools aren't great at that, and we have to suck that data out and go put it somewhere, right? So this is our first version that I was talking about a little bit previously. It's the first version of our cost and usage report. Any people familiar with that report, how that pipeline works? 1 or 2? Okay. So roughly the idea is Amazon gives you their bills in a PDF form or a CSV form, and they put it to an S3 bucket. From there, they have some built-in connectors that throw it into data sources like Redshift, which can be very expensive. And then you got to parse through that. Just talking to a customer over here and putting it into BigQuery, these things can get expensive quickly with the amount of data that we have. So we worked, again, with our partners at Amazon to build the first version of this pipeline. And as you can see here, at this point, you have an S3 bucket that file gets put into, the cur data. And we pick it up with a serverless technology called Lambda. And Lambda is just running code on someone else's computer, basically. Almost runs itself. And what basically from there is it spans out from a manifest file, does some processing on it, dumps to another S3 bucket. And from there, we took that data from the processed one, the ND.json bucket, and we threw it into Athena, which Tableau has a connector for. Good to go. First version was a little rough. We built it with Amazon. It was built with Node. We're not a Node development team. So the next version of this pipeline that we built and went into production earlier this year looked really similar, except it was very different. We rewrote the entire thing, and we were using Python instead of Node. And you can see one thing did change. We started using Snowflake. Athena was great and is great, but it has scaling limitations. When you're starting to talk about data warehousing and a lot of data coming in, we process our cur data reporting 3 or 4 times a day. It's a lot of data. And I think there's over 150 columns of data that it drops into the cur data. It's complex. This is why we needed a Jenna. So the second version of our pipeline is working great. Jenna's going to talk to you a little bit more about how that's working for us.
Okay. All right, so our results. About the beginning of this year is when we had the second version of the pipeline out, and it's been in place. And so what results have we gotten? Well, if you remember those challenges that we had around visibility, transparency, and accountability, we've been able to deliver on that and to improve those areas. So how did we do that? If you think back to Kevin's version 2, you saw that all that data from the AWS Cost and Usage report ends up in Snowflake. It's a great place for it. We can easily connect Tableau to that data source, and we published some data sources that can be used by anyone throughout the company who has questions about cloud cost. So you can see that we have a monthly view of cost, very popular by the number of views that the data source has had and a number of workbooks that are attached to that. We also have a second data source that is a daily view, and that is a view of the current month as well as the previous month, but very, very granular. You can dig down by resource ID, by hour, which is the level at which Amazon records a number of this information around cost and usage. So that is a better data source if maybe you're a developer and you made a code change and you want to see what the cost impact was of that change. And then lastly, our third data source is our look at the budget by our different budget groups. So at Tableau, we have teams from development, marketing, sales, operations who use AWS. And centrally, that budget sits in the operations bucket, but we have a number of users. And so internally, we come up with budgets for each of those budget areas, and then we can report their actual AWS spend against those budgets. In addition to this, having this data source, it allowed us to have more regular conversations with our internal customers. So we meet on a monthly basis with the development team to go over their AWS costs, talk about things that are coming up ahead as it relates to their forecast. So we're having a lot more regular syncs that we did not have in the past. This also sets us up to be able to have conversations about forecasting and budgeting and kind of knowing what's ahead. We did not have those things before. So finance is a lot happier, accounting has a better view of what's going on, and people throughout the company who are using the cloud can gain an understanding of what they're spending in the cloud. We also sent out a survey. We can say that we delivered cloud cost and visibility, but we went ahead and asked those internal customers. So we have the statement, AWS cost visibility has improved compared to last year, and we wanted to ask people if they agreed or disagreed with that. And we found that all of our respondents either somewhat agreed or strongly agreed with that statement. So there's still a little more work to do, but we feel pretty good about those results. The next big thing that we were able to achieve is we introduced a common cost methodology and language. So to illustrate this, it's a little better to understand via a graph. So here we take a look at our cost from 2008. And this is just looking at the unblended view, which if you're familiar with AWS Cost Explorer, it is the default view. And essentially it's the cash bill with AWS each month. And so we have this cost broken down by department. You can see there in kind of the bluish color, spending a lot of money, especially in August and in the month of December. Well, those are costs related to our RI investment. And if we look at July, or June, I think it's June there, the cost so much lower. Well, we're part of the migration assistance program, and that's when one of our credits came through. So this doesn't really give us an accurate picture of how our AWS actual consumption is changing over months. And that's where this common cost methodology comes into place. And we refer to that, rather than sort of like similar to actuals, we call that consumption. And we use a calculated field in Tableau to calculate this from the AWS cost and usage report. So to take a look at this, the first thing that we do is we look for any of the enterprise program discounts. And what we say is ignore all of those discounts. The way that our discount shows up in the bill is whatever account of the all 400 use the most of a particular service, they get the entire discount related to that service. So it can cause things to not really be represented fairly. The next thing that we do is we look at any usage that's discounted usage. That's essentially any resource that's running on an RI. And we say, for that, let's look at the public on-demand cost as if it wasn't running on an RI. Within our master billing account, that's where we purchase all of our reserved instances. So if an account has a resource that's running on an RI, in the unblended view, that's going to look free. It's going to look really good for their cost. We don't want to show them that. We want a common language that we all can speak, and we're all talking about the same thing. So we look at the on-demand cost. And then lastly, for all other usage, we look at the unblended cost. It's equivalent to the on-demand cost. So basically what this allows us to do is to take all of our AWS consumption, strip out credits, discounts, RI benefits that end users don't really have control over, and create a common view of actual usage that we can compare one area to another. When we're building forecasts or building budgets, we're all using that same language. You might be wondering, okay, well then how do you actually come up with a budget? Well, we just roll all those inputs together, And then on top of that, we apply our RI savings that we expect to incur, and also discounts or credits that we expect to receive from our cloud provider to arrive at an operating budget that accounting and finance are more interested in. But internally, we use this concept of consumption, and we compare it to, rather than budget, we call it quota, to report AWS cost and usage. So going back to the example here, what do costs look like after when we're looking at this consumption calculated field? You can see all the RIs, they've been removed. And if you look closely, you can see that kind of that light green color for our online spend, well, it's larger than it was before. Online being one of the biggest areas, they were getting a lot of that discount across the whole company dumped into their account. And also a lot of the reserved instances were running in that account. So their costs were looking a lot lower than they actually were. So this provides a way, apples to apples across the board, we're all using the same terminology, and we can truly compare cost from one account to another account, from one division to another division within inside the company. And lastly, cost optimization. So cost optimization doesn't come from the CUR report alone, but that pairs very nicely with third-party tools that Kevin mentioned, a couple of them, where you can get information about resource metrics, CPU of your EC2 instances, or connections to RDS databases. Using that information together with the CUR data can really create powerful stories or identifying where waste might be. So this year, with the work that I kind of head up, we have been able to reduce the waste within our environment by over $300,000 a month worth of consumption. So to give an example of how some of those opportunities are unfolded, some can be very low-hanging fruit, unattached EBS volumes, easy. Delete them, clean them out. Sometimes we've been able to leverage the data from the cost and usage report to have conversations with teams. So this is an example of one team that we worked with throughout the year. So you can see in the beginning of the year, their cost, not fluctuating much, really month over month, but they're spending quite a bit of money. But from the metrics data, we could tell we weren't getting much out of all of that compute that we were paying for. So we partnered with the team around the April-May timeframe to work with them, using this data to show them what they're spending and identifying where opportunities exist. So the team sharpened their pencils, turned off things that weren't in use, and also for things that were being used, looked at, well, can we shut those off when we're not using them on weeknights or weekends? And from that, we were able to get $25,000 of savings per month than where they were spending before, which is about 64% reduction in their spend. So a big win there. And this was all enabled by having a data source along with metrics about the resources to say, hey, we think there's a better way to be doing what you're doing. It also was really helpful because this particular area, unfortunately, didn't have budget to be spending. So it helped get us closer to our budget as well.
Overnight spent, right?
So last, we're going to talk about what's next, what's ahead. So we've had the solution in place for about a year. It's been very stable and requires very little maintenance to update. Occasionally, we might have to update a little bit of code if there's been a change by Snowflake, but it pretty much has been very stable, which is great. So looking ahead, what we want to do is continue to drive financial ownership. So today, I mentioned the budget is all owned by the operations group, and we show back to different areas of the company what they're spending. But what if we could do a chargeback to those areas so that if we are over budget, it's not always the operations who has to roll up their sleeves and do the hard work to try to get things back on track and to make teams feel more accountable, so to continue to drive that accountability. And how do we do this? Well, we think that the consumption model sets us up very nicely to be able to take the costs that accounting, like the OpEx that they might record, let's say in the month of November, and allocate that back to the different areas based on their percentage of consumption. So let's say that our development area in the month of November spent 55% of the total consumption. Well, they would get 55% of the expense that was recorded by accounting then. And so we would take the budget and kind of allocate it out that way as well to continue to drive that accountability, to make sure everyone feels a bit more accountable to the spend that they're incurring. All right, going to turn it over to Kevin to wrap things up.
So for those who weren't at my talk on Wednesday, Tableau we've developed a program to scrape all the APIs out of Amazon. And we've open sourced it and put it into a graph database. From there, we do some other things, but we basically get it into Tableau. So we thought of an idea of using well-architected reviews and the best practices out in the world, and put together a dashboard, how we can be more mature as an organization. And specifically, we drilled in on Wednesday on security. Today, we'd like to build into our cost optimization bucket as well, to hopefully, possibly eliminate those third-party tools. Amazon came out with new APIs that allow us to give recommendations for RIs. And at some point, we could probably remove that third-party system. So this is what we're looking to continue to have transparency with conversations with teams, using something like the Cloud Maturity Dashboard, allowing them to go one-stop shop and look at things that they're doing to help improve their scores. This is great. This is what we are doing internally. But what can you do leaving this room and go email your teams on? So Tableau actually wrote a blog post on this about monitoring your AWS spend in Tableau. Madeline, one of my coworkers, put it out earlier this year. It connects directly to the CUR data and the output that Amazon gives you. And it gives you an example viz that I believe is up on Tableau Public today. Super helpful. The second thing, if you don't want to use those Redshift or Amazon like direct click solutions, there's a spot for you there. Except don't use QuickSight, use Tableau. But basically, this is the billing data pipeline that we developed with Amazon. This was our SA, we helped build it together, and you can go in and there is a quick start guide to download it and deploy it today. We really thank you for being here. Obviously tip your waiters, this is lunchtime. And please, please, please fill out the survey responses. We want to make sure that we can come and speak with you all next year, or instead of we'll be like folding t-shirts or walking around for 30 miles and giving people water. We really appreciate it. Thanks y'all for being here.